you. I'm going to start with a story, a true story. In 1996, I was working at the World Bank. I'd been there for 7 years working in systems. I have a math degree. So I had taught people about how to use procurement, budget, project supervision, time series data, blah, blah, blah. And I decided that I wanted to go out on my own, and I wanted to teach people about the internet. You remember 1996, right? So that's only 14 years ago. Netscape had just landed on the desktop. People were still picking up mice like Scotty in that Star Trek movie and doing like this with it, right? They didn't know how to use it. And you remember that most of the screens were text with the little blue underline, the hypertext markup language, and people didn't know what it was, but that's how the links were indicated. So I decided I was going to have my own business. I called it Untangling the Web. I incorporated, I got my marketing materials together. I created a swan song for the World Bank. And my swan song was that I worked with a live PC, and I told people about what this thing was. And so we brought it up on a screen, and I showed them how to use a mouse, and I said, all these little packets are going to run out of the back of the machine. They're going to find the fiber optic backbone in Rockville. They're going to travel to China or Brazil. All these little packets are going to come back. If any of them get lost along the way, the machine will know that. It'll go back and get them, scoop them up, throw them up on the screen, and you'll have a document from the other side of the planet in less than 2 seconds. And in 1996, when you did that, people's mouths dropped open. Right? Then you had to talk about security and, caveat emptor and all that stuff. But just the idea that you could grab something and put it on the screen in less than 2 seconds from Brazil was like a wake-up call. Well, this little presentation that I did was a huge success in the organization. And my boss, who was charging for my time, had me doing dog and pony shows everywhere. They were videotaping me, sending it around the planet. And in a month, she was earning what she was paying me in a year. That was interesting. But what I got was a lot of acclaim and a lot of attention and a lot of visibility, and there was a group that wanted to transform the culture of the institution, and they drafted me. They gave me a better offer than I thought I was going to get on the outside working on my own. They said, come help us change the culture of the organization to a knowledge-sharing culture. We are a knowledge-hoarding culture. We are aggressive in our isolation. Our people believe that what they know, their experience and know-how, is what makes them distinct and unique and valuable to the organization, and they're loath to make it visible for free or close to it. I said, okay, that sounds like fun. That sounds very cool. So I'll do that. So I worked on this small team, about 6 people, 1996, remember. We brought in state-of-the-art IT consultants who could create an intranet. In 1996, an intranet was a big deal, right? And with the World Bank, our intranet was going to be in third world countries, which was a big deal, right? Because most of the infrastructure for the web at that point, except for what the military paid for, was paid for by commercial efforts, and they didn't tend to go to third world countries. But the bank had to, so we were going to have websites that could be accessed in Bangladesh or Burkina Faso and so on. This group had huge visibility. We had a dedicated budget. We were paying top dollar for our consultants, and they were cool people to work with. And we'd create these demos, and they would be like jaw-dropping. And we were just imagining all of our information was going to go all over the planet. And after a year of doing this, there were the same 6 people in the room. Nobody else knew what we were doing except for the president and the CIO, who were kind of tapping their toes, saying, so when does it go live? When does it go live? When do we start seeing results here? It wasn't happening. It was just this core group. And so I decided, I'm out of here. This mission is a failure. They are not changing the culture of the institution. So I found another job inside the World Bank. I was typing my resignation to the CIO, saying, I'm out of here, I'm off the project. And while I was doing that, this was a year after I started, Steve Denning stopped by my office. Now, Steve was running a parallel initiative, but he had no budget. In fact, Steve was on his way up the organization for the previous 25 years, and then right when he was getting ready to become the vice president of the Africa region, which is very high up in the organization, the World President Bank died. Lewis Preston died. And Jim Wolfenson came in, and the whole thing got reshuffled. And Steve got parked in what he calls Siberia. He was told, go look into information overload, which was code for get lost, right? So Steve was kind of walking around, no budget, no authority, and he popped into my office. He said, Seth, what are you doing? I said, I'm resigning. This project's a failure. It's going nowhere. The same 6 people have been working on it for the last year, and nobody else knows what we're doing. And he said, give me an hour. An hour later, which was 6:30 at night, I got called into the CIO's office. Now, at the World Bank, when you get called into a vice president's office at 6:30 at night, it's usually not good because you really can go home on time if you want to. But I got called in, and basically I got assigned to work with Steve. I got transferred to Steve's unit, where I was on loan, so I still wasn't part of his budget. There was another person who was there with me, Leslie Schneer. She was also on loan. The only budget Steve had was half of an assistant, and she was what he could direct, what he had control over. The three of us started working on knowledge management at the World Bank. 1 year later, we had $60 million in annual allocations dedicated to our program. We had tens of thousands of people interested in what we were doing, working on knowledge sharing across the organization. 2 years later, we were designated one of the most admired knowledge enterprises. We had IBM coming in to study us. We had people from across the ocean coming in to study us. We were in a completely different scenario. What we had done is what I call rapid, widespread engagement. We had lit a grass fire that moved throughout the organization, and it traveled farther and faster than anything we were capable of directing. That was my first experience that I wrote this book about how to accomplish. Now, I worked with several other initiatives at the World Bank. Since that time, the last 2 years, I was working directly with Jim Wolfenson, who was the then president of the World Bank, helping him to get traction where he was not getting it internally. And then I left. I worked for 2.5 years with Gaddy Vasquez while he was director of the Peace Corps, helping him with the change in demographics and the introduction of technology into the Peace Corps. Since that time, I have worked with about 40 organizations, about 5 major large-scale change initiatives, including 2 years that I spent at Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab, where we looked at knowledge sharing. And knowledge sharing in a secure environment presents a particular set of challenges, which we got into, and I can talk about that in terms of some of the case studies we do. But that gives you an idea of kind of where this came from, this idea of rapid, widespread engagement. What I found out about it was that it is very countercultural, but it is not at all impossible. And so what I'm going to try and do here is explain to you, and I'm just basically going to be using the table of contents of the book that you have at your desk, how it is that we accomplish it. I will tell you this. There's 2 ways I can describe it intuitively before I get into breaking it out. One is that it's people-centric. If you look around this room, if you look around any of the rooms that I work in on a regular basis, and most of what I do is not speaking, it's consulting. If you look around the room, what you see are the world-class experts in their particular domain or niche. Technical expertise abounds. It is huge. I could pick any one of you out and take you out on the street, and you would shine in your area of expertise simply because you've dedicated decades of your life to studying and you have experience and know-how in your particular domain. What is lacking in organizations is not technical. It is not project management. It is not program management. It is not strategy. It is not even tactics. What is lacking is the soft stuff, the people part of change. The soft stuff is the hard stuff. And that's what this book is all about. It's about how do you inspire people who are professionals to create an esprit de corps so that something moves like wildfire through the organization. So that's what this book is about. It's about the people side. The second thing I would use to describe it, if I had to pick one word, it's engagement. How do you get people involved, participating, wanting to contribute, wanting to be part of it, feeling like it's their own initiative, like it's taking them where they want to go? That's what this is all about. It's about engagement. So let's jump into it. Employee engagement is 2 things. It's doing the right thing for the organization because we are professionals. None of us is here only in our own self-interest. We're here because we believe in the organization. We're here because we believe in our country. We're here because we want the goals of the organization to succeed. But you also have to do the right thing for the individual. You have to do both. And that's where the sweet spot is. And you want to do it in ways that inspires and activates people. Now, when you're talking about accountants or scientists or intelligence professionals or engineers, when you're talking about inspiring and activating them, it's different than when you're talking about people in social services or people in human resources. You have a different set of things that really turn someone on. What turns on a project manager? Coming in under budget and on time, right? What turns on an accountant? Numbers that tell stories. What turns on a scientist? Pushing the frontier of their domain. So what turns on an economist? Coming up with new models that get results on the ground. You have to say, who am I working with and what is it that excites them about what they're doing? That's what this project has to be about. So you're talking about generating value for the organization and generating value for the employees, the individuals, the people who are carrying out the mission, and that is your sweet spot. That is where esprit de corps takes place. In the overlap between those two, that's where the magic happens, and everything that I'm showing you is about how to get into that spot and what to do when you get there. I already talked about this. In 2002, I was selected a visionary by the Center for Association Leadership in, this is the important part, storytelling, community building, and knowledge management. Those first two technologies, storytelling and community building, are as old as we are. In fact, the narrative intelligence hypothesis says that storytelling is about 75,000 years old, that we developed narrative in our brains when the size of our tribe exceeded our ability to know who each individual was one-on-one and what their power location in the tribe was. So as soon as we got above the Dunbar number, which is, does anybody know what the Dunbar number is? I think it's like 150 or 105 or something. I should know that. As soon as we got above the Dunbar number in the size of our tribe, we had to develop narrative, which is, so-and-so did such and such to so-and-so, in order to track the hierarchy. So storytelling, we're talking about a technology here that's hardwired into the human brain. These are some of the organizations I worked with. I now write for Fast Company and the Washington Post. Here is the table of contents of the book, and this is what I'm going to be talking to you about. The first thing is how you create rapid, widespread engagement. And probably the biggest obstacle to really doing it is control, is wanting to hold on to the reins and pull the lever. So what's going to make someone give up control? They're going to have to feel confident that they're getting the result they want. That's really what it boils down to. You don't give up control until you're confident that the ship is going where you want it to go. Then you can let go and enjoy the ride. Second, we're going to be talking about how you communicate so that it spreads. And this is a trick statement here because I use the word it. Communicate so people get it and spread it. And it is a noun, but the it in this sentence is a verb. You want a conversation that spreads. You want a set of questions. You want something that's exciting for people to talk about. For example, at the World Bank, knowledge sharing. One of the things we would say to people is, remember, this is 1996. Last year, a healthcare worker in Zimbabwe needed the cure for malaria, and they found it on the website of the Centers for Disease Control, created in Atlanta, Georgia. What's important about this story is that the bank's not in it. But what if we were? What if our knowledge was available to all the people who needed it when they needed it, at no charge, so that they could make use of it? In the World Bank in 1996, that was an exciting question. What if our knowledge was available to the people who needed it when they needed it at no charge so that they could put it to action? That was the conversation that spread like wildfire through our organization and allowed us to let go of the control so that we could see the results. So one of your jobs, if you've got a change initiative, is to ask yourself, what is the compelling conversation for my stakeholders? What will they get excited about and talk about when I'm not there to introduce it? Third, you need to energize your most valuable players. This whole process, I told you, is people. It's social network diffusion. You need to know who your most valuable players are. Now, the thing is that most of us, when we think of our most valuable players, pick the wrong people. We pick either the people on the organizational chart who have influence, and they are a piece of the puzzle. You've got to include them. When I did work at Shell, I spent 2.5 years introducing technology down hole, they call it, which means down in the ground in oil and gas fields. We had budget people in the room because they freed up the resources. But that's not all who we had in the room. We also went around and looked for the practical visionaries. Those are the people who have their feet on the ground and their eyes in the clouds. Those are the people who are doing exciting things on the front lines. We brought in people at the coal face, which is the term that they like to use in the oil and gas industry, which means the people on the front lines. So these are the guys with big fat hands and dirty fingernails, and most of them in the old generation are guys, right? In the new generation, we've got mixed gender, and we have people who like to sit at keyboards because they're doing computer modeling mostly. But in the old generation, we had the guys who ran the rigs. They were in the room too. And we had folks from headquarters in Rijswijk, because they were the ones who were orchestrating institutional strategy. And we had vice presidents of operations and technical in the room, because they were the ones who made the key decisions. So you got to know who are the most valuable players, and you got to energize them, set them alive, like I was talking